Yo, this hot, this the spot, there it is, pod.com. We're interviewing the best comedians, so tune in quick and get your ears receiving them. We talking about life and life to stream right to you, from the microphone right to your home, dude. Side note, this might get embarrassing, but no, don't sweat, yo, cause there it is.
Welcome to the There It Is podcast, a comedy podcast to help you find your inspiration. I'm your host, Jason Farr. Let's do this. Great episode today. We have writer Stephanie Streisand on, and big shout out to previous guest Becca Beberaji for connecting us. Real quick before we get to that interview, friend of the show and recent guest Alex Brzezlowski has a Twitch show, Try to Relax, which we talked about in his episode. I was on it last Thursday. It was a fun thing to be a part of. I did a fun, silly bit on birds, and I got some nice encouragement from him to do it, so I'm very thankful for that. You can watch the bit I did on my Instagram, at Jason Farr Pics. Also check out Alex's show on Twitch. Go to trytorelax.live or twitch.tv/trytorelax, and it's on Thursday nights. Okay, on to today's guest. She is awesome. She has written some really great things. She talks about all of that, but she also talks a good bit about managers and acquiring a manager or an agent. Really great advice there. Let's just get right to it. Here's my chat with Stephanie Streisand.
When did you start at Magnet? How did we miss each other?
I know, right? 3 years ago.
Oh, that's how we missed each other.
Yeah, you were there a while ago.
Yeah.
I mean, in researching you, I saw that you've been to a few different theaters and been on teams there, and you were at the Magnet back in like 2012 or something like that.
Yeah.
And you were writing on a couple of sketch teams. One of them I had Chet Siegel on it, and Sebastian Connolly, yes, that's his.
Yeah.
I've not met him. I've heard
and
that he's a great
also
comic.
Sarah. I do that all the time. Sarah. She runs. Oh my God, I'm forgetting everything. What's the feminist satire site called?
The Reductress?
Reductress, yeah.
Oh, great, yes. So you were in New York at that point, and you moved out to California. Did you do UCB while you were here, or when you were out in California?
Yeah, no, I started UCB in 2004.
Okay.
I was there when there used to be did you watch Cobra Kai?
I have yet to watch it. I want to. I just haven't yet.
I just finished it. That's why it's on the tip of my brain. But there was Ali and Armando left UCB and started the Pit, and then Ali and Armando split. And there was I feel like it was only in UCB performers' heads, though. It wasn't I feel like Pit performers didn't give a shit. And Magnet performers definitely didn't give a shit. But it was you can't go there. You'd be a traitor if you perform there, which is so crazy to think about now.
Yeah, it is.
That it was limit your performances.
So, yeah. That was what theater? And, I mean, you said Magnet people didn't care.
The Pit and UCB used to have
Yeah, well, I heard there was a big falling out, but and I don't know the details. I just heard that there was a big falling out. So I didn't know that was what was going on, that people were saying, hey, don't do both. There are a ton of people who are doing multiple theaters at the Magnet now, so no one gives two shits there.
I think performers have realized, don't let the theater use you use the theaters.
That's a great philosophy, honestly. I mean, there's a lot of different opinions on how to run theaters. Of course, that's why there's so many. But I think regardless of what theater you're at, it should benefit you more than the other way around. And and you're at the PAC Theater. Are you still there?
I teach every once in a while at the PAC Theater now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, and that's Yeah, I'm familiar with Brian James O'Connell. He's been on the podcast a couple of times.
Oh, yeah.
And he definitely is one who would say, like, the theater should not use the performer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the
You should
pack, I
not,
think,
you
is...
should not like be taking classes just to be eligible for one show a month.
Right. That's his, that is something I heard him recently talk about.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like I said, there are different theaters and different ways to run. I'm saying that just for people who run different theaters listening, who have a different opinion. Listen, we all have different opinions.
Yeah.
That was the thing when I was at whenever I heard someone complain about the way a theater was run, I said, well, you can always start your own theater.
Start your own theater, or just like look around at other theaters. There's always... great thing about all of these schools of thought is that they have different thoughts, and you only benefit by learning different ones and then deciding what works with your voice. There's something to learn at everything.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You shouldn't limit yourself to one school of thought.
I agree. I mean, at least exposing yourself.
Yeah.
If you like one style more than another, then so be it. But yeah, don't tell yourself that you shouldn't even try to learn a different way,
right?
Which I think does happen. I do think some people think like, nope, this is the way, I'm going to do it, and I don't care about how UCB does it.
Right. Each successful theater is successful because they're teaching something correctly.
Exactly, and that's why I always thought it was silly when I would hear from certain theaters criticize other theaters for how they do improv, and it's sort of like, but... there are people successfully doing improv at those theaters.
Right.
So they're famous people who've been at I.O. and UCB and Magnet and Annoyance. Groundlings, Second City. Right. So it's kind of ridiculous to say this is the only way to do it successfully or do it right. It's like, well, how are all those other people having success with doing it a different way?
Right.
You did a lot of sketch writing, I know, but you've been a performer at the PAC and at the Magnet. What are you teaching right now at the PAC?
Well, I'm not teaching right now at the PAC, but I recently.
Right.
I recently would teach pilot writing, which was an 8-week course where at the end you would have at least a first draft of a pilot that had your voice and that showed off your voice and humor. And I would teach a 1-day workshop, which is like, here's the structure of a pilot. There's like math to it, just like there's math to improv or sketch. There's also math to writing a pilot. And so I would teach it using examples from television shows and stuff like that to show how the math works in the pilots. And then the second half of the workshop would be, how do you get representation? How do you get work without representation? How do you get pitch meetings without representation? What do you need to get repped? What do you like? Just the basics of like career shit. Because I feel like a lot of theaters don't really teach that side. And it's really easy. It takes like 30 minutes to teach that side. It's just like, let me sit you down. This is what you need to do to get to where you want to be when it comes to making money off of what you do.
Wow, that's really great. That's invaluable. Are you looking to do any online courses to offer that sort of help for people, or is everything just on pause because people don't even know how to move forward right now in the industry?
No, the last couple workshops I taught were online.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
And you started comedy as a teenager, didn't you? Did I read that correctly?
Yeah,
like
I did.
15?
Yeah, I did.
What made you want to get into it at such a young age, and what were you doing at that time?
I was the year before that, I was a CIT counselor in training at a summer camp, and I was removed from it for just being like a wacky impulsive 14-year-old kid. And so the following summer, there was like, I couldn't get a job at that camp because they were like, we don't want her. And then like when you're 15, you're too young to really be a counselor at any other camp. And so I was like, oh, I don't know what I'll be doing this summer. And my mom said like the most mom thing, which was like, oh, this place called UCB has opened up, and it's taught by the person who taught Gilda Radner, which is not true. But,
Right.
but it's taught by people who were taught by the person who taught Gilda Radner. And at the time I had like her one-woman Broadway show and all that stuff. And I was like, oh, I'll check it out. And they had a summer intensive. So it was like going to camp, except everybody was much older than I was. So they'd have class from like 10 a.m. to like 3 p.m. And then they'd be like, let's go to the bar. And I'd be like, I'm going home.
Maybe I'll get ice cream, but not going to the bar. Yeah. What was that experience like in the classroom performing with older people? I mean, I've been in one class where there was a teenager, and I wasn't anticipating that before before I signed up.
It was no one treated me weirdly. It was just like, oh, that's like, maybe somebody was like, oh, somebody said that's really cool that you're starting so young, because somebody was from Chicago taking the class, and they were like, oh, I've been doing this for a long time. Like, it's great that you're starting so young. Like, you'll learn it really fast, especially in level 1 when you're like, you're having tons of fun because it's just like super fun. When you're not like in your head going like, I need to figure this out so that I can like advance or whatever. It's just super fun at the time. But still there are those rules where it's like, oh, I keep on asking questions. Fuck. But it's like, oh, well, because you're starting so young, it'll like click a lot faster. Your brain's more malleable.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely that learning stage. Your brain is still developing, so it's a good time to learn those skills. It's also, it makes more sense for someone to do a summer intensive when they're a teenager than for an adult to do a summer intensive.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a surprise you were the only one, the only 15-year-old there.
Yeah. At the time, they didn't do like a teen outreach program. I think at the time, the only person I can think of that was a teenager was like Zach Woods. They didn't do a lot of like outreach for teenagers at the time. I think my parents had to lie and say that I was 17 or 18 to get into the class. Maybe it was like 19. Like the age. I feel like there was an age thing where my parents were like, nah, she's 19.
Well, good parents, I say, because that was a great thing for them to say, like, this would be good for you, and let's get you in on that. I mean, it's not like they were shooting you up with heroin.
No.
It was. I'm sure somebody will complain that your parents did that, but I think those people are wrong. I think your parents are right for doing that.
It was fine because it was 10 to like 3, and then you went and you went home.
Yeah, it was perfect hours to just go and learn a skill.
Yeah, and then like some Fridays or Saturdays, I would go into the city to like see a show, and I would see somebody from the class, and I would be like, well, bye, have fun at the bar, I'm gonna go back home.
No, I love that story. That's really cool. So after high school, what were you focused on? Like, once you were done with that intensive and you were here, did you keep doing improv? Did you go off to college somewhere else and step away from it for a while?
I went to college at Hofstra University.
Okay.
So I was able to keep on taking classes and do stuff. And then I went to get my master's at John Jay. while I was still like writing shows and things like that. And then there was a point where I was like, what am I doing? Like I either am going to do something in this field or it's like just for fun. And if it's just for fun, then like, why am I spending so much time and energy on it? This is something I really want to do. So I have to figure out what I need to do to make a living doing the thing that I really want to be doing.
Very smart approach. And that's part of the reason why I think it's so good that your parents got you involved with that so early on, because you could really hit the ground running later in life.
It always seemed like, oh yeah, sure. But it really took me years to like go like, oh, people around me are in their 30s and they're not making a living off of doing comedy yet. So I need to like sit down and do you know Rocco Privatera?
There's a Rocco that I've recently sort of gotten acquainted with. It might be the
Does he
same
have
person.
curly hair?
Okay. We're talking about two different people, I think.
Oh, right. But he, in like 2010 or 11, he decided to do, he invited a bunch of people, whoever wanted to come, to meet him at a cafe on January 1st and talk about what goals you wanted to set for this year and and what steps you would need to take. And the idea too was you set your goals and like maybe your goals complement somebody else's goals. And you could end up working with that person this year on two goals that complement each other. And he and I happen to have complementary goals. He always wanted to write music for a musical. I wanted to write a musical. So the two of us got together and we wrote the 2017 Tony Awards, which eventually became the future Tony Awards. And that was through that. And I also was like, I wanted to make a web series. It was good to do that on January 1st because it really lines everything up. It's like, what steps are you going to take to get there? I do it now every year. And it's been really helpful.
I love that advice, January 1st, figuring out what you want to do and then thinking about the action steps that you have to take to get there.
Just like the little steps. And then, every week or so, just like write down one small step you could take towards that goal.
It's such a good idea because it's like a lot of the things that we want to do with our lives at the beginning of the year, we end up not doing because it feels like such a daunting task when we say, I want to do this, and it's just this big goal. But when you say, well, what's the little step I can do this week to get myself closer, that makes it so much more tangible because all any of those big things are a series of little steps.
Right. That's what nobody's an overnight success. People are overnight successes after 7 years.
Right. Yeah, I mean it is like someone could get overnight famous, but that's not success.
Yeah, it's usually a 7-year process.
Success is something that's been sustained.
Right. Yeah, it's and having those little steps, it's easier to reach a little step than it is to be like, well, I want a job. I want a job tomorrow.
Yeah. You sitting down and saying, I want to write for a web series. I want to do this. It's led you to create a lot of things because you have written a lot of digital videos and you created a TV series for Dreamworks. And it's no small feat. I mean, it was 2018 that you created that series. It was called Maddie Paz is a Noob.
Oh, yeah. Maddie Paz is a Noob about a kid who sees life as a video game and it's done in Let's Play mode. So it's like you see cut scenes, quote unquote, but then when he's moving around and stuff, it's all POV. Wow.
And that's on Amazon. And that was a series of laying out your plans helped you get there.
Yeah.
When you started writing digital videos, which you've written for a lot of major companies and networks, how did you find your way into that? How did you get into that world?
Different ways. Like the Maddie Passes a Noob came about because I got into the CBS Diversity Showcase, and through that I met other really amazing writers, and one of them happened to also be working for Dreamworks TV on something, and she said, "Hey, video games. They're looking for like a video game idea, not for video games, but a television show that incorporates video games in some way. Do you have an idea for that?" And it's like, "Oh yeah, totally." And then I spent the rest of the night coming up with an idea that I totally already had. And I pitched it and they liked it. And that's how that got made, through like friendships made, and like working and writing with people on the CBS Diversity Showcase got me that. With other things, it would be like I would get a general with a production company, and maybe something that I pitched, like they couldn't make something that I pitched, but they liked my pitches, and then they would think of me later on for another project and call me up and be like, "Oh my God, would you be interested in working on this project with us? We need to fill another spot." So that's how I got to work on other things too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Meeting people it's why they tell you to network, because you never know what person is going to lead you to something.
Right. So like networking helped, going to generals, and generals are basically just like, "I shower. Do you shower? I'm not insane. Are you not insane?" That's what most generals are. It's just that I'm not annoying.
I'm not a psychopath. You can hire me, and no one will get canceled.
But it's also like you check out their place, and it's like, "Oh, I'm not a toxic person. Is this a toxic environment?"
Right,
oh, no.
Right. It's good to know.
So you're like you're checking each other out.
For sure. It's like any job interview or first date. You're definitely seeing. People have talked about, I guess, with SNL, how like that meeting, especially for writers, that meeting is just the asshole test. Like, is this someone I want to spend all night with? Right.
I feel like it's even crazier for SNL, because that, like with most writing jobs, it's like, could I stand you from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Right. Whereas SNL, it's like this pressure cooker.
24 hours together
for several days in a week, and then then we'll have a day off, and then we're back to seeing each other every hour of every day.
Yeah. It seems very intense.
Oh yeah. That's why I heard that's part of the reason why they go 3 weeks on and then a couple of weeks off. Is because it's just a lot.
I feel like I don't know how writers for SNL who have families do it. Like it's amazing what they're juggling.
I don't either, because Mikey Day is around my age. And he's got a wife and a couple of kids.
There must be, like, he must just have a date planner right next to him at all times.
Yeah, and Keenan, he's a father and husband as well.
I don't know how any person juggles it. That's got to be so hard.
For sure. Yeah, and I don't know. So Tina Fey, I think, had her children when she was on 30 Rock. Maybe maybe there was a transition period.
But even still, like,
that was still intense. I don't know how. Famously, Amy Poehler did an episode of the show pregnant. Like, and then like very shortly after that, gave birth. I think she gave birth on a Saturday, so she was planning on doing the show, and then her water broke. And so, that day or the day before, she texted Seth Meyers and said, "You're on your own, buddy."
Oh, my gosh. Oh, my gosh. That's so crazy. Yeah. Iconic
people. I guess they're the ones who can do that.
Yes. It just, SNL seems so intense.
So, So you've worked on all these different things. You clearly learned what your voice was at an early stage. When would you say you found, how many years did it take for you to really find your voice that you knew was the voice you were going to be honing and needed to sort of go in the direction of?
Years. Because I didn't go to, I stayed at UCB for like just UCB for a while. And UCB teaches one way, and it's like, these are these types of sketches. This is what we want. We want it to be like boom, 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 boom. So, and then I took a class with Armando Diaz at the Magnet when it was kind of new. And I remember he was like, so what's everybody's goals in the class? And I was like, to be a writer on SNL. And he was like, that's so specific. Why don't you like broaden your goals a little bit? Why don't you make your goal like creating a show? And I was like, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, buddy.
It turns out.
But it's like, it turns out he believed in me more than I did.
Right.
But it's like
Armando's really, really good at that.
Yeah, but it was just I didn't want to hear it at the time.
At the time, yeah.
I'm like, God, I was so young and stupid. Like, SNL is literally one show, and there's hundreds of other shows.
Oh, right, yeah, and that's why it's so strange when you hear people who were just gunning for that show or like Daily Show for so long, and then they get it, and they don't move away from thinking about what's next. They still just go like, okay, I'm here, what's next? And they're just never happy still because they just don't know what to do. And it's sort of like, well, maybe it's because you didn't find out who you were before you did it. Maybe you didn't broaden your horizons enough.
I would say once there was a big like, I'm tired of trying to get on teams. I'm just going to do something cheaper, which is write my own show and try to just get a run on my show. Which at first it's like, it's not a lot of money, but it is money up front. But then once you have a running show for a year, you don't have to pay anybody money.
Right.
So I did that, and through doing that is how I found my voice. Because I was writing what I thought was funny and what I wanted to do for a year. I wasn't trying to like stay on a team. I wasn't trying to write to the taste of the director or the teacher, which was something that happened a lot at some of these theaters. So I got to like kind of learn my voice that way. Writing the web series helped me too. And then once I moved to LA, it just, I figured it out. I got on a mod team in LA. And once I got on that team, it was like, oh, this is it. This is what I've been gunning for all this time. Like, and then I did that for a year, but looking back, I should have done it for like 2 months.
Oh, wow. And
that's like, I got a manager to come to the first show, and then I got reps during that, and that's all I needed. Because you don't make any money off of it. You're part of it. You're part of a team. As a writer, your name's never spoken during the shows. So you're like an invisible person.
The writers spend so much time with it. The most time.
Yeah, they spend a lot of time. They don't get a lot of credit. And it doesn't move you either way. I mean, I guess it depends on how you use it. I just couldn't figure out how to use it past going like, oh, I made this mob team. Do you want to come see our first show? And they were like, yes. Then I got rep that way. But I've been through a couple of reps, but that was my first rep.
I've heard that there's, for writers especially, like once you're in, you're not set for, but like you're in. Once you're in, you're in. It's probably easier to move forward or move on when you already are in.
No, that's.
Okay.
I think maybe you can be like, oh, I dropped my manager. Well, I mean, if you don't have a manager anymore and you're going to get a new manager, you have to explain to the next manager why you don't have a manager anymore.
Right. Okay. Well, I guess I'm thinking if you have a manager and you want to switch to a different manager.
Yeah.
So you're not managerless.
No, you have to be managerless before going to a new manager.
If you're not happy with your manager,
yeah,
can't you take meetings with other managers?
they won't meet with you.
Interesting.
They have the managers have like a group. They come for, like, they love each other. They're a family.
Okay.
So they don't poach from each other. So they won't meet with somebody else's client.
Okay. Okay. So you have to
like,
drop them.
Yeah, you have
then
to
go meet.
You have to be brave enough to be like, I can go without a man. I know I'll get one if I. It's
Okay.
very. Yeah, people treat managers like, oh, once I get a manager, then they'll just get everything for me, and that's just not how it works either. You got to work with the team with your manager.
Mm-hmm. I have a question about managers, and I'm not a writer, so I'm an actor. But when it comes to working with your team or working with your managers, what sort of advice would you give people, whether they're writers or not, that can help them get gigs and get work, that makes them sort of in concert with their manager?
Communication.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a lot of people I know who recently get a manager, they're almost afraid to call their manager or email their manager, like, oh, if I call too much, they'll like hate me and get rid of me, or like, oh, I can only call them if I have something to impress them with, and blah, blah, blah. And it's really, you have to figure out your relationship with your manager. Like, literally call them or email and be like, I'd love to set up a time, and just say like, so how often can I call you? Or like, how should our schedule work? How should this relationship work? They work for you. They get paid if you get paid. And some managers are like, they like a relationship where like they're the parent and you're their kid, and they're like, hey man, what are you doing this week? Or like, some managers are like, you're on a team with them I don't know football, but it's like, you do this and I do this. Okay, break. Like, we'll attack from two angles to see if we can get this job. And some managers are like, all right, you do everything and then I'll follow up to make you look more legit.
Okay.
I mean, there's all different styles. There's all different types of relationships. And that's why going to panels, like, managers are doing a lot of panels now online, and just industry does panels and stuff, and you can kind of like, you can hear the Q&A with them and get a feel for them and write down whether you like them or not, so when you're ready, you know who you would work well with. And so it's all about working together, and you shouldn't be afraid to call your manager.
Yeah.
Calling your manager only helps them. As long as it's not like, why haven't you gotten anything for me? It's like, well, that's not how it works. So like, you got to work together. But yeah, you should lay it out. Like, so do we talk every 2 weeks? Do we talk once a month? Like, what's the deal? How's this going to work? Just up top, just like figure out what it is, how you guys work together.
And if you feel like they are not right for you, like if you don't like your manager, because you've switched from a manager before, how do you handle telling that person? Do you say like, hey, I just need to move on, or do you go into more detail? What's the right approach?
I mean, being professional. It's a business, so it's one of those conversations where it's like, hey, I mean, you could get into specifics, like some, if you want, where it's like, hey, like I gave you this number to contact. They said they wanted you to contact them and you didn't contact them. And that's come up a couple of times. So I feel like maybe you don't really have time for me, like you do your other clients. So this isn't a good fit, or something to that, depending on why it is you're getting rid of, why it is you're firing them. But it's just like, it's just business. And there's also, going back, sorry. There's also the relationship where like the manager's your best friend. I know a couple of people in that kind of relationship, where they're just buddies and you're like, oh, you guys go to trivia night together? That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that can work. I mean, it definitely is something for people to consider if it's the right sort of type of relationship. And
I think a mistake that people make too is that people are like, I just need to be repped. I just need a rep. If I get a rep, then everything changes. And it's like, actually, one of the worst things you could do is just like grab any rep, because then you're stuck with them for a year. And if they're not the type of relationship that you wanted from a manager, you're going to waste a whole fucking year.
Right. And if you aren't happy with someone, and maybe it's just, I mean, obviously, you already said one caveat to switching is thinking, like, they're not getting me any work. It's like, well, it's because it doesn't work that way. But what if you do feel that you don't see eye to eye, and you don't feel like you're hearing from them when you do reach out to them? Does that,
right.
That to me would say, like, okay, maybe that's a good time to move on. But what are some other what are some other situations where someone might be mistaken in thinking that they should move on? Because I could see people saying, I don't know if I should tell them that they're putting me up for the wrong type of gigs, so maybe they're just the wrong manager. And I could imagine in some of those cases, if you just talk to them.
Yeah, you just have to. It's a lot of communication. It's if you have if you're an actor and your manager keeps sending you out for Shakespeare, and you're like, well, I want to do comedies. That's just like, you guys need to sit down and talk. And it's like, hey, I appreciate all this Shakespeare, but I want to do modern day comedies. I'd really love to be submitted for more of that. If they're like, look, there's nothing out there right now but Shakespeare. But even then, it's like, well, that's not true. And it's just like, you have to come to them with opportunities. You can't just be like, I want these like hypothetical jobs that I don't know if they exist or not. It's like, these are things that I know are coming up. I would love to be submitted for them. What can I do to help be in the best spot to be submitted, and blah, blah, blah. So it's always about working with them. Sometimes they may not know, but they might not know that that's what you want to go for. Sometimes managers will be like, oh, I'm submitting you for these types of shows over and over again for writing. And it's like, not your jam. And it's like, hey, I feel, when there's like a problem, when they're trying to, when they're trying to give you writing notes that change your voice completely.
Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah.
Then it's like, well, why don't you go get that fucking client?
Right. Yeah. That's sort of like submitting someone to maybe Shakespeare and they're better for modern romantic comedy type, or like a Fox TV show. It's like, right. You don't know who this person is.
Right. It's like, if you're like, I need you to go train in like, this type of stuff and just like really change who you are as like an actor or a writer or whatever, then it's like, okay, it seems like you wanted a different client than you got. So like, why don't you go get that client? And this isn't working between us.
Right. Good advice.
But acting is different, I guess.
Of course, yeah.
I'm not in acting work because you need to expand like your tool belt, right? Do actors have tool belts? Is that what they say?
Yeah.
How do actors work? But actors are always like learning and expanding what they can do and everything. But like, if you're a writer and you're like, stop submitting me for crime dramas and stop when I hand you a sample, and don't be like, yeah, but how can you make this a crime drama? Just be like, okay, like it's just seeing eye to eye and communicating. It's like, it's all about communication and the relationship. If when you, after you talk to them and go like, hey, I'm not interested in this, but I'm interested in that. Like I said, you give them some leads of like things that are happening instead of just like hypothetical, like, I want to write for all of these shows that don't exist. Then it helps them work with you, and it helps you work with them more. But if they kind of drag their feet and they're like, I don't care about these leads you gave me, you're going to work for CSI Miami, whether you like it or not, then it's like, okay, we're not seeing eye to eye.
Right. So that risk, getting rid of one or firing a manager and then moving on to try to get a new manager, what sort of time frame did you give yourself to get a new manager, or how long did it take to get a new manager even?
Well, I've done it 3 times.
Okay.
And you kind of start from scratch each time in a way.
I see. Yeah.
So you just have to make yourself busy.
Yeah, I was going to ask what you did in the meantime. Like, what were you working on? Were you able to work on much?
Yeah. So you work on samples, you put up sketch shows, or like as an actor, you would perform in shows and take a class and go to panels and stuff like that. And it's whenever you go to like one of those Q&As with a writer or an actor who are successful in their fields, or who are paid to do what they do. And it's like, well, how'd you get there? Their stories are always so specific, and it can't apply to you.
That's the thing I've learned. Yeah.
So it's one of those things where it's like, you throw spaghetti at the wall and one of the noodles will stick. And you just have to know when one is not going to stick. So it's like, if you're writing a bunch of samples and you can't really get them seen for some reason or read, well, then that's not the way you're going to get noticed. So now it's time to switch gears and like put up a show that you can invite people to, or make a web series, or a podcast, or a video sketch, or like, it's just like throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks, and something will eventually stick. Because like I said, the reason why people get so specific in how they found a path into getting paid to act or write is so specific, because there's so many different ways to get to where you want to be. And it's just about knowing when to switch gears to try the next thing.
Yeah. I like that analogy. Everyone's, I guess, heard it, but I still like that analogy, especially its application here of just like throwing noodles and seeing what's going to stick, and eventually something will stick.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the stick-to-itiveness of I guess the entertainment industry that I think is maybe most important for people to.
And some people get there faster, and it's only by luck that they picked the noodle that was going to work for them, that was going to stick.
Absolutely.
They just happened to pick the one that stuck, where they could have chosen other things that would have taken longer, and then finally thrown that thing that stuck.
Mm-hmm. So what would you define your voice as?
Silly and stupid, but maybe clever.
I'm really interested in seeing Maddie Paz as a Noob. Is that still on Amazon?
Yeah, that's still on Amazon.
Okay.
And then I wrote on the Detour.
Oh yes, that's right.
Which is a TV show that stars Jason Jones.
Yeah, on TBS. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very silly. It's really, really silly.
Yeah.
It's a good time. It's a good time. It's like National Lampoon's Vacation.
Yeah.
It starts off that way, and then it's like, oh no, there's something bigger that involves federal law enforcement.
Yeah, no, that's a good analogy for it. I didn't put 2 and 2 together, but that's really the perfect analogy for that show. So transitioning into your TV work,
Mhm.
obviously that came when you had a manager. I assume it's hard to, I guess.
No, I got Maddie Paz in between managers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then other work that I did, Deep Space. Yeah, just other stuff I got without a manager, and I just.
Oh, wow. I guess it's, I'm thinking from an acting point of view, if people don't book things that big without an agent usually. And if they do, I guess they have to like get one real quick.
I guess it's like one of those things where if an actor did, like, it would be if God, I don't know acting side at all, but I guess it would be like if you knew the casting directors, and the casting director was like, "There's an open slot, like you can come in and audition right now if you want." I think it would be like the equivalent of a casting director reaching out to you.
Ah, gotcha. Very cool. Very cool then. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm really admiring that about your story the most, I think, is your stick-to-itiveness. You're continuing to persevere throughout different sort of situations, because I think it's such a good learning lesson for me and for others that you have to just keep at it. Like, don't
just be a little delusional.
You gotta be just ever so slightly.
Ever so slightly delusional.
No, it's kind of what it takes. It's just like, it's got to work out. It's gonna work out. You know?
Yeah, it's fine.
What's next for you? Like, what are on January 1st of 2020? What were you saying you wanted to accomplish this year?
I wanted to write on a show and sell something.
Check. I guess.
Yes. So I was lucky enough to get staffed on to be announced show for Dreamworks. That'll come out in 2021. And right now I'm a staff writer on The Mighty Ones, which comes out in 2020, which is going to be really silly. Really fun. It's very, did you watch like Rocko's Modern Life as a kid?
No. I've heard of that show, but I did not watch it as a kid.
But The Mighty Ones is very like SpongeBob meets Ren and Stimpy kind of humor.
Okay, gotcha.
It's for kids and stoners.
Okay.
It's so much fun to work on that show. Awesome. And that comes out November 9th on Hulu.
Awesome. Congrats.
And then I just signed a deal that's to be announced with Universal. I've been hired to write a movie for them.
Very cool. Congratulations.
Thanks. It's really crazy and insane.
Yes, it is. Yeah, that is. Yeah, I guess, getting that headline and deadline is pretty, or Variety is pretty exciting too.
I don't know how that works because I don't have any good pictures of me. So I assume that when it's announced, they'll just show a picture of just Universal instead.
Well, congrats on all that and good luck with those projects.
Thanks. Yeah. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's just like little, and also the one where it's like sell something that was like, it probably won't happen, but like, I'll just say it to say it. And then I'll just work on getting staffed. And if something comes my way, I'm going to swing hard at it.
Great. That's awesome. And then I guess, is this the time of year when you start thinking about what you're going to hope for on January 1st?
No, I really can't see that far ahead of me. I'm lucky during quarantine to have jobs that like keep me focused, keep me busy. I stress out about like, oh, how do I can't fit this joke in without making it too long. Like I enjoy going crazy over that rather than looking outside and just worrying about the big picture stuff. It's a nice break. It's a nice breather, I guess, to fret over a dumb joke for like 20 minutes to an hour.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that is that can be the tough thing, because there's so many walls you can hit during that, and that people don't power through, and I guess sometimes you just have to power through that.
Yeah. But it's a lot of fun. I got it's the same I got a second dog during this time.
Aww.
And so I have sobbed a couple of times over training.
Okay.
Where I'm like, please stop shitting on this rug. Just stop it. And it's nice to cry over a dog instead of the presidency for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm going to get political, but
I know I'm right there with you. Well, we have reached the end of the episode. It is time to create something together, and I have a couple of ideas. One would be maybe to demonstrate this January 1st, having goals and how to come up with them. And the other is maybe a little more creative. It's what sort of tactics do you use to break jokes, or when you hit that moment of like, oh, how do I shorten this joke? And you're thinking about it for 30 minutes to an hour. What sort of tactics do you use to sort of improve upon a joke? Which one do you like?
Which
of those two options?
Oh man, it's your show.
I'm really interested in the second one.
Okay.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on different directions people can take in order to make a joke work better.
Okay.
Those are the tools in the tool belt sort of thing, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of dumb tricks. So it's like if a joke is too long, what do you do to shorten? I mean, it's really just tightening, making sure there's no redundancy.
Right.
It's usually about the entire script. So like make sure there's no redundancies. A dumb trick to do is just changing if there's a character that's only in that script, or if it's your script. So it doesn't matter what the characters' names are. Mm-hmm. Change the 8-letter name of a character to a 3-letter name and watch like the script go up a couple of lines immediately. Like even that'll do it.
That's hilarious.
But making sure that your action lines are 3 lines max at most. Like if it's to 4 lines, just try to get it up.
Okay.
It's usually like try to find the shortest way to say what you're trying to say,
and without losing.
And usually it'll work. Yeah. Usually it comes out funnier. Okay. And it's I mean, you also have to like kill your darlings or whatever, but in those cases, it's just like which one's the less funny joke.
Right. Okay. And when a joke isn't funny and you're trying to make it funnier, what sort of tactics can people take then? I mean, sometimes it is just shortening it, like you said.
Oh, yeah, it's shortening it, but it's also like if you're an improviser or a sketch writer, if you learned in those classes, it's just one of those like you do bits on it, like you try to beat it, and you pitch on it, just trying to beat the first joke, and you just try to heighten it, and then eventually the good joke will come out of that.
Right. I sometimes find when I call a friend and I mention a joke to him, then we just end up goofing around and just not even trying to work on the joke. We're just saying like, oh yeah, it's like blah, blah, blah. And he'll say something and then I'll say something. And then we just have a back and forth. And I'm like, oh, this is that thing they try to teach you in improv classes or tell you to do with like a stand-up joke or something like that. Yeah. They talk about tags. Like that's what this is. Okay. I know the natural, I know it in its natural habitat.
And then of course there's always like, if you get stuck and you're like, I don't know what the fuck I want to write at all. Like, let's say you're like, I need to write a new sample, but I can't think of anything. Like, fuck everything. That's when you should just watch like movies and television and pilots you've never seen before. And usually, like, even if it's a bad pilot or a bad movie, there's going to be something in it that it's like, oh, it could have been good if this was what it was about. And then you'll find like you have a brand new idea that like you'll get inspired by something bad or good from the things that you look at and watch, which I guess is like an artist being like, I just go to the museum and I'm just inspired by other art and then I just make my art. So I guess it's similar in that way. But yeah, I get inspired from other people's work, whether it's bad or good.
Very cool. There it is. Thanks so much for being on the podcast, Stephanie.
Thanks for having me.
Really great having her on. I love that advice that she gave, and I hope you loved it too and take a lot from it. Check out The Mighty Ones. It's premiering on Hulu November 9th, so mark your calendars. Follow her on Instagram at Steph Streis and on Twitter at Steph Streisand. And you can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at There It Is Pod. Also subscribe to our comedy lifestyle newsletter and support us if you can. If you can, it's a tough time. We have a Patreon and a PayPal, so you can go to thereitispod.com for newsletter and support info. We also have a YouTube page coming. Check back for details. We have another fun episode coming up next week. Until next time, be good to each other.
The music for the theme song was created by Neil Brooks. The rap was written and performed by Nick Acevedo. The logo for There It Is was created by Jeff Prater. The There It Is podcast is produced by Jason Farr.